Hello again, this is me, the Undead Viking. I'm here with another RPG story time. This is just stories from my past playing of role-playing games, and just like these funny or interesting or whatever stories that I experienced over the last like 40 years of playing D&D and other role-playing games. Now today is an interesting story because it not only is a story that actually happened from my past, but it also is a story that is kind of a well, not really a lesson, but it's a story that is to like kind of what it takes to incorporate new people into your gaming group. Now, lots of you out there probably have like your standard gaming group. You have your 2 to 5 people that normally come over to your house and play games with you and whatever. Now, if you're anything like me, then you've kind of kept the same gaming group for some period of time. Now, I know that I'm probably not like a lot of people, in which the fact that the people that I play D&D with, I played D&D with, 30, 35, 40 years ago. So I have kind of this weird situation where the people that I grew up with have mostly stayed in the same area as I have, and so we've just stayed in contact. I mean, the people that left to go to college eventually came back and did not actually leave the area. Now, all that being said, you might have a group that you just put together at your local game store, and like there was one of those things where it's like, oh, we're looking for D&D people, and you get people to join in. However, one of the problems is that when you have a long-standing group, whether it is a year or 2 years or 40, you have this kind of unspoken barrier to new people entering into that group. Mostly because it's the fact that like you have situation, even if they are friends or whatever, they don't have the years of like shared experiences, the years of understanding, the years of, just what's accepted and what isn't at your particular table. Now, I'm not talking about anything really gross or evil here or anything like that. I'm not talking about the fact that you get somebody into your group and it turns out, there's some sort of like miscreant or misogynist or racist or something like that. I mean, those people are just like not going to fit in, obviously, and there's a problem. I'm not talking about that at all. What I'm talking about is that basically you get people that have different just aspects to their personality that maybe just don't like flesh well with your particular group. Now, they might be awesome human beings, and they might just be like these people that are just like super funny and super great to be around, but for whatever reason, one, they're feeling pressure, and I've had players who come in to play with us say this. It's like, I just don't, you guys start talking about D&D stories you had 10 years ago, and I have no idea what you're talking about, and I just kind of sit at the table while you guys laugh and joke about something that happened to you, and I don't have anything to say. And that is like a problem. They don't feel included. They feel like they're not part of that experience. Now, also another problem they have is like, again, it's like there's just, people are different. People just react to situations differently. People just don't, like have like the same social cues as others. Now, I'm not saying one like they're like oddballs or anything like that. It's just like my upbringing is like nothing like most of the people that are going to watch this, and so we probably won't be able to like have a lot in common. And so if you're going to sit everybody at the table with a lot of people that don't have a lot in common for 6-7 hours and play a D&D game, problems can arise. Now, the biggest thing about this is that you probably looked at the title of this, and this is true. This is a D&D session where one person almost was like physically attacked. It was basically like I have a friend, a very, very good friend, who has mellowed out a lot, since then, but he was in a situation where he was antagonized to the point where he thought he was going to have to fight somebody at the table, not because of what really was going on at the table, the D&D table, but just the conflict between the two people as far as one person that maybe thought they were being funny and another person that, didn't take it as being funny. Regardless, taking one little step back before I dive into the story, if you are going to include somebody, this is my only suggestion, if you're going to include somebody brand new into your gaming group, take some time to explain to them, if you have a long-standing group, take some time to ingratiate that person slowly. Have them come over and say, hey, just why don't you come over and just watch a session. Maybe give them an NPC for them to control before they create a character. And just have them and then explain to them. Maybe they've never played D&D before, maybe, or whatever campaign or whatever world you're playing. Maybe they've never played a role-playing game before, but they've just always been interested. We have a person in our gaming group right now, his name is Angel, and he never played D&D before, but he was in his late 30s. He's always heard about it. He thought it would be amazing. He happened to meet Andy, one of the guys in my group, and they just struck up a conversation, and he talked about the fact that his friends are coming over to play D&D, and he said, that's something I've always wanted to play. Would it be okay if I came in and watched you guys play? I mean, a little bit of a weird question, right? But I mean, the fact that he was, and Andy was like, well, let me talk to the other players, and we all said, yeah, let me have him come in. He came in, played an NPC, said, this is really fun, I'd really like to play. We gave him some six-sided, gave him a character sheet. He made his Mage Thief right there, Uldril, weird name, but awesome guy, made his Mage Thief, and Uldril is like this cool, crazy Mage Thief character, like always getting into hijinks, and he's just a lot of fun to play the game with, and I'm really glad, because Angel's like a super cool dude, and if he hadn't taken the chance to like talk to Andy as he was walking in front of his house, and they hadn't struck up that conversation, I never would have met him, and I never would have had this cool dude playing the game with me. But I've had other situations where we've invited people that wanted to play, they came in and played, and it just didn't mesh, and that's unfortunate. But I think one of the things that we really corrected really well with this is the fact that Angel did step in slowly. He got into the pool slowly and slowly reached his toes in, and then he just kind of meshed very well with the group. So anyway, if you're going to bring somebody new in, just remember that you need to do it slowly. So, to the story, and I apologize for that. The day that Brad and Brent almost came to blows over the gaming table. So, back in the day, we played in my buddy Scott's basement. It doesn't matter. This was just, he was one of the few of us that he was married, had a kid, and had a house. I was living in an apartment at the time. Most of us lived in apartments at the time, but he had a house. He had a basement, which was like, yes, basement. So, we had a place to play. And there was a person, and my buddy Brad, who I've known since high school, had played with us, and Brad loves playing D&D. It makes me sad that he's too busy now to play it, because he just always is 100% into his character. He role plays well. He buys into the situation. He just nothing more than loves just to play the D&D game. Laughs, jokes, has a blast. So friend of a friend kind of situation, work situation, this gentleman named Brent. I'm sure the guy is super cool. I can't remember his last name to save my life. My buddy Matt always would say Brent something, rules lawyer, because we couldn't remember because the guy had an encyclopedic knowledge of the rule book. It was one of those things, what's the rule on that? We didn't have to open up the DMG. This is back in 2nd edition D&D. We didn't have to open up the DMG to find the rule. He would just say, oh, that's this, that, and the other thing. And he didn't say it in such a way like a rules lawyer, oh, it's that's what the rule is. It was like, hey, no, actually, that's what this is. And I was like, oh, sweet. We know how to do that. So, but that was just, we couldn't remember his last name, so we always just say Brent something, rules lawyer. But anyway, regardless, for whatever reason, Brent just didn't mesh well. I mean, and it was, and I always, when I say that, it's really easy to blame the person that you're with for that. But I mean, in all honesty, I think it takes two. It takes two people to mesh together, right? And we just wasn't firing on all of the correct synapses and all the correct things. It just wasn't working. And I'd like to believe that eventually Brent would have just kind of been out of the group. But it doesn't matter. But this has nothing to do with characters. It has nothing to do with anything. I want to precurse this by saying that my buddy Brad, he is 6'3". At the time he was probably around 280. He was in the military. He's a guy that took care of himself. He lifted weights. Did everything. He was into bodybuilding. He was a big guy. But he was also as gentle. he was loyal to a fault. If anything ever happened with any of us, like he would protect you, and he would do what he had to do, and he did the same thing. He does the same thing with his wife and his children. But he's a gentle soul. But it just, this was when we were a little bit younger, and tempers tend to flare when you're younger. Don't have the years of wisdom or whatever. So regardless to anything, Brad really likes accounting. He likes taking care of things, and one of the things he really likes to do is he likes to map. He likes to just do the maps of the dungeons, and he does really good maps. He's very meticulous about it. He brings pencils. He's always like making sure like he's like doing everything, and then he even puts in very big descriptions. Like he'll make the if the he does 5 feet per square. He does his maps so the rooms are large, and then like he'll write like the stuff in the room, what's in the room, things like that. He's very meticulous. He does a very good job with them. But for whatever reason, he wasn't able to map. I think somebody else was doing it, or I don't know what the reason was. So he wanted to just keep track of the party treasure. You know how like when you're playing D&D and you have like a situation where it's like, okay, well, it's like we're not going to divvy up the treasure. If we get like 500 gold, we'll divvy that up right here. But like if it's like gems, or if it's like art objects or things like that, we will like just put these in the party treasure, and then when we sell that off, then we'll divvy up the gold to everybody else. And so somebody has to keep track of the party treasure. And so Brad was like, okay, I'll do that. So like I said, he likes accounting. He makes a nice spreadsheet, and he starts delineating everything and doing a very good job of it. So for whatever reason, I have no idea why, Brent got it into his head that he was going to also keep track of that. Now, admittedly, Brad was a little territorial about it, and he was already kind of annoyed that he wasn't able to do the maps. So he was just like, well, he's like, and he kind of looks over and he notices that Brent is like, we just killed some trolls or something, and we found some gems. And then Brent just said, oh, how many gems? And they're like, oh, there's 9 gems. And he's like, oh, and what kind of gems are they? It's like, oh, it's like, I don't know who is, I forget who was DMing. It was either Jason or Craig, but it was like, oh, there's like 4 emeralds and 5 sapphires. And I'm not technically remembering this correctly. But he's like, oh, okay. And then he starts, and he's writing this down. And Brad just says, what are you doing? And Brent says, "Oh, I'm keeping track of the party treasure." And Brad's like, "Well, yeah, I'm keeping track of that." And Brent's like, "Oh, well, I figured I'd keep track of it too." And Brad said, "Well, first of all, you haven't done it, for like the last 2 sessions, and so you don't have it all." And secondly, why would you start now? I mean, he like points to his clipboard, and because Brad always had a clipboard with all this stuff on it, and he was just like, and if you look here, it's like, here's like his, you don't have it on a clipboard, but like basically like a sheet of lined paper, and like it's like 3/4 full of like the different things that we found. And Brent's like, oh well, it's like, would you read that off for me, so I can add those things to my list? And now Brad's getting a little annoyed, because he's like, well, but why are you doing it? He's like, I just think it'd be good for us to have 2 lists. And so if you could just go ahead and read off the stuff that's on your sheet there, so I can write it down. And then Brad's like, now, and I'm sitting next to Brad, and I always wouldn't tell when Brad was getting annoyed, and because he'd get this little grin on his face, and he was like, and he just put his clipboard down, and he just scooted it across the table. And he said, well, here, just copy it, and why don't you just keep that, because I'm not going to keep track of it anymore if you're going to do it. And then Brent grabbed the clipboard and scooted it back towards Brad, and he said, no, I think we should both keep track. Could you please read those off for me? And now Brad kind of just chuckled a little bit, and I noticed when he scooted back over, and my buddy Matt and Matt's kind of a troublemaker, and he's like, what's going on? He got this little smile on his face, like he saw Brad starting to get a little agitated, and Brad goes, no. You know, and then you could have heard like all of a sudden it was like everybody at the table, like everybody's having those conversations, you know, and you're like, oh yeah, what's going on? Oh, did you watch Star Trek last week? You know, that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden everybody kind of realized, like, stop talking. Like about 7 or 8 people in this basement, they all stop talking. They look over what's going on, and you see, he's like, I'm not going to bother keeping track of this if you're going to do it. So just just take that piece of paper and keep it, and you can remember. And I was like, okay, yeah, and he said it in kind of that tone, that kind of angry tone. And Brent, and who, mind you, was not 6'3", 280, you know, lifted weights, that kind of thing, grabbed, took the thing, and once again went, and he said, look, just read them off for me, okay? Like in that kind of tone. And I was like, ooh. And I was about ready to say, you know what, I'll read them off, you know. And then Brad kind of half stood up at the table, picked it up, and just slammed it down in front of Brent. And he said, you want to keep track of it, you do it. And then he starts, you know, he's like going back to sit down like this. And I don't know why. To this day, I've never seen this Brent something rules lawyer again. But he grabbed, when he, boom, slammed down the thing, Brent picked up the clipboard. And he threw it at Brad. And I remember watching it in slow motion as Brad was like sitting down like this, like sitting down. And it went, like, as you're sitting down, if he hadn't been sitting down, it would have hit him full whack right there in his face. And he sat down, and it was just like enough that, like, Brad had a little bit of longer hair in the front. The wind actually pushed his hair. I can still remember seeing. I'm laughing because I shouldn't be laughing at the violence that was possibly happening here. But I mean, it was just like, and I felt the wind because I was sitting right next, and it was like, and the thing kind of tumbled and hit me. You know, I'm like, oh geez, you know, like the thing hits me, and I remember just like, oh God. And I remember Matt grabbed the clipboard, which I thought was a good thing, because I think if Brad had picked that up, he would have like broken the thing over his head, over Brent's head. But Brad, like, you know, these giant like meat hooks that were his hands, he started to stand up, and like he had this look of like the Hulk, and he stood up, and he got about halfway up, and then he sat back down. And his face was beet red, and he actually, as he was clenching his fist like this, he started counting to 10 with his teeth clenched, like 1, 2, like to try to like control his anger. And then in the midst of this, I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but Matt, ever the rabble-rouser, just starts reading the list off. 1 silver ring, 3 gems, green. Just starts reading off the list, and I'm laughing, but I shouldn't. But I mean, and then and I remember Brent like kind of looked. He looked over, and he realized what he had done, and he got up, and and I remember he picked up he put his books, like, boom, books, backpack, zip, and he rode his motorcycle to Scott's house, grabbed his motorcycle helmet, and walked up the stairs and out of the house, and he never came back. And I say this, and I'm kind of laughing about it. And then in the meantime, he's like, Matt, as he's going up the stairs, is still saying, you know, 4 copper ingots as the guy's climbing the stairs. And I'm just sitting there, and like Brad like eventually got to 10. And like he was like, and he's like, and he apologized to her. I'm sorry, I lost my temper, and then he actually said, you know, it's like, hey, just tell him that if he wants to come back and play, he's more than welcome, and I'll apologize for losing his temper. But Brent never came back, and we never did. But that is like the closest I've ever had a situation at a D&D game, like a real D&D game, where like I thought physical blows might come to happen between two of the players at the table. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any funny stories about, and I shouldn't say they're funny. Anytime there's like physical violence or anything like that, that isn't funny. But if you have any kind of like altercation that's beyond the actual game, like maybe some like whatever, that after the fact, I don't want to hear about any like bad stories where somebody got hurt or anything like that. But I mean, like if it's a story where like it's after the fact, where like people were able to apologize and come back, but at the time, maybe looking back now, you can kind of chuckle and laugh about it. I'd love for you to share those with me. I'd love to read those. But thank you for taking the time to listen to this particular RPG story time. If you like this, go ahead and hit that whole like button and share or whatever it is you want to do, or subscribe to the channel if you want to like have more of these RPG story times. And until next time, just remember to be the most awesome human being you possibly can be. I guarantee you, the more you do that, the more happiness you will put out into the universe, and the more happiness the universe will give right back to you. Until next time, I'm the Undead Viking. You're awesome.